That Part 3, as amended, stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Part 4 stand part.
Chair.
David Clark.
Mr. Chair, Part 4 concerns the amendments to the Goods and Services Tax Act 1985. And, that fresh in our minds, of course, those of us on this side of the House who have constituents struggling at this stage in their lives from the rising cost of living are the changes that this government made in 2010 to in the so-called tax switch, where 44% of the value of the tax cuts went to the top 10% of earners, and the bottom 20% of earners got just 2% of the value of the tax cuts. That was some switch. Any benefit those who were on low and middle incomes got was very quickly swallowed up in GST and then in subsequent rises in the cost of living. This change in the GST has really affected us as a society. Recently there was a report which made it clear that we have one of the most unequal societies. We're becoming more and more unequal. In fact, New Zealand is now more unequal than it's ever been in its history, and that is not something to be proud of. When we have an unequal society, we have wasted potential. We have people right now in poverty falling between the cracks, and we've got to ask, was that tax reform the sensible tax reform that should have happened? And is there any better tax reform proposed in this bill that would sort out that problem of widening disparities, the poverty that is eventuating, the wasted talent amongst our poor people who are not able to put nutritious food on their table in some cases, who are not able to afford the school books, the school shoes and the raincoats that they need for their kids, who have kids getting preventable illnesses because they're living in cold, damp and overcrowded homes. And those preventable costs are borne by all taxpayers. They're borne by high-earning taxpayers and low-earning taxpayers. And really there's a huge social shame associated with being poor, and also with unnecessarily because of this government being poor, and also with those health effects that go with being poor. And those people who are missing out as a consequence of not having the resources they should have will also not become the taxpayers of the future in the way that they could. Mr. Chair, I put it that if those people were given the full resources to develop as young children, we know that early intervention has high rewards, that those children would grow up to be high contributing taxpayers. And that's why we need a tax system that is fair, where everyone pays their fair share, where those at the top pay their fair share. We know that the highest earners in New Zealand, only 50% are on the top tax rate. We know that there's something not fair there, and that's part of the reason we need tax reform. We also know that sometimes people don't meet their tax requirements for a variety of reasons, and we deplore those who do not fill out correct returns on this side of the House, and that's been the topic of much debate this evening. I want to address a couple of specific clauses in Part 4. One is the keeping of records. Clause 151B, the keeping of records, suggests, and if we take the first section there, in section 75 brackets 3D, name, address and registration number, in quote marks, is replaced by name and address and registration number or tax file number as applicable. This is the kind of change we see in this bill. We see radical reform, adding the words and the words or tax file number as applicable. Now this kind of tax reform is hard to oppose. It is hard to oppose. I see that politically. That might be a strategy from the government of the day to put up tax reform where the words and the words or tax file number as applicable are added into the legislation, because oppositions can't get up much steam against that stuff. But what it also reveals is a government that's bereft of ideas, a government that is not able to implement the real change that's needed to get New Zealand's economy back on the track, to get New Zealand's economy back on a track that would grow the pie for all New Zealanders. And that's what we on this side of the House believe should be happening. We know that our trading partners over recent years, China and Australia, have been going gangbusters, and we know that during that time real wages in New Zealand have dropped. And that is almost unbelievable. What's going to happen when those economies falter? You know, New Zealand's going backwards already. Will we go back further? So we see this kind of tinkering in the legislation where we should see more adventurous, Mr Chair,
David Clark.
more adventurous change. Another clause that leapt out at me when I was reading through was the retrospective GST exemption in clause 135 of the bill for the Auckland Council Independent Māori Statute Tory Board, established by Section 81 of the Local Government Auckland Council Act 2009. And it was with some relief that I saw that hyphen in there. If it had been an E there, it may have been restricted. Perhaps some might jest to members of the Māori Party, the Māori Statue Tories, as we've perhaps seen them acting in the recent debates on asset sales. I'm sure my colleague Reno Tirakatani might have something further to say on that as the debate proceeds. This kind of change, again, a small change, something that is difficult to oppose because, you know, in and of itself it's worthy, but it really is tinkering, and we're tinkering here with little bits of GST here and there. We're not expecting to see a step change in the economy as a result of these changes to the GST treatment. We should, it would be great if we had a government that did have a vision, that did really want to make change that would benefit our economy, that would really get our economy moving, pro-growth tax reform, policy that promoted savings, perhaps through a universal KiwiSaver. We know that this government's had more positions on KiwiSaver than the Kama Sutra, and we wish that this government would adopt a position that actually was beneficial for all New Zealanders, not just a position that was all over the place, Mr Chair. It would be a pleasure, I'm sure, if we saw a positive position adopted. Variety is not always the spice of life, as we know in the area of savings policy. So this government is bereft of these changes of direction in terms of GST and in terms of what kinds of changes could be made more broadly, and that is why it is the government that has had the worst growth record of any government in the last 50 years in New Zealand. That is why 50,000 Australians are leaving annually to make their permanent home in Australia. 1,000 New Zealanders are leaving. I'm saying Australians are leaving. It's not quite got to that. They're leaving New Zealand too, because this government is bereft of ideas. 1,000 people we know left Dunedin, my hometown, last year permanently, left Dunedin for Australia because they saw greater opportunities there. I'm assured it had nothing to do with the local national member of parliament. It's because the opportunities were better in general under the national government's term in office abroad. And it's also true that this government is failing because perhaps it hasn't addressed the IRD system that is failing. John Key's pointed out it's not working, and that it needs to be upgraded because the government is being held to ransom effectively through having a computing system that is out of date and not able to adopt the big changes that would be needed to get our economy back on track. And it's perhaps symptomatic of a government that really is giving up, it appears. And that's not good enough. We think this government is letting people down, and that's what we're hearing out on the street. People are telling me, those people that did support John Key, and I find that a little challenging, but they say they supported John Key because they were promised a brighter future, but now they're disappointed because it is not being delivered. In Dunedin we're seeing jobs cut left, right and centre. We're seeing our economy slow down, and these people are disappointed. I mean, that's the word on their lips. They are disappointed with what this government has not offered them. And that is why they are leaving New Zealand at a rate of 1,000 people a week for Australia. Mr Chair. We will come, I'm sure, to more about the software development. It's not touched on in this part of the bill, so I will I will leave that conversation for the next part of the bill, but suffice to say that the kind of change that we see in section 151B around the keeping of records is symptomatic of a government bereft of ideas, bereft of direction, only now reduced to adding the word "and" or tax file number as applicable. And that is not real change. That is not going to improve our economy, Mr. Chair.
Honourable David Parker.
Mr. Chairman, I want